The prospect we're taking a look at today might have came from the Fighting Irish, but I think it's going to be a little bit of fight of Michaels here. With, mic'd up here. But we got today, I'm not going to try it. I'm just going to say we got Jeremiah. So you want to try to pronounce it, you can, Mike, but how you doing?
I'm doing well. We have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, right? It wasn't that hard, Mike. Give me a break. Not so sure we're going to disagree that much. It's going to be tough when you see my grade. I don't know how much higher on him you can get, but I'm sure you will somehow find a way. So obviously, though, with all these opt-outs, Mike, we've been kind of talking about small sample size questions in that various area. Well, Owusu wasn't an opt-out, but he certainly does have a small sample size. What are your sort of concerns there, or did you think what you saw on tape, trait-wise, is just too overwhelming to where you can kind of look past this a little bit?
No, it's concerning to be honest. The way how strong it was going to be on my take for Jeremiah, a little bit less when I saw this. It being his junior senior season, had a lot of time to sit back and kind of just learn. So he's a little bit later than I'd like to see. I do have to have a premium on people, players that come out in their junior or their redshirt sophomore seasons. So I just seeing 2 seasons, it just being his junior and senior season, I think that is a concern, but not a ton, not a whole lot.
No, I agree. I had to look up his age there real quick, and because a lot of times with these seniors, sometimes what you'll see is they're not necessarily a significantly better draft prospect than they were, but now they're just more so developed than these other 19, 20, 21-year-olds that they're going up against. But Owusu's only 21 years old, right? So even though he is a senior in that regards, he doesn't have, say, Najee Harris's 23-year-old body sort of hinging and holding him back in that regard. Otherwise, in terms of the pro day numbers, I usually like to talk about those there. Didn't bench press, Mike. I know, kind of at his size, obviously 221, we had some strength concerns. What are your thoughts on that? Is it just a point of, hey, I already know I'm not going to be the best there. Why do it? Or would you still like to see something regardless?
I'd definitely still like to see it. I think that's the biggest concern. Just watching his play, I think it is his strength, and then at his size, it's the concern. The biggest concern would be his strength. So no, I'd like to see it. That's definitely kind of a knock. Why he didn't do it? Did he? I don't know if he had an upper body injury or something like that, or he just chose not to. But not having that number, no, definitely a little bit of a head scratcher. And if you're team looking to draft him, it's something you're probably addressing, um, especially depending on the role you're looking for him to fill.
And he also didn't run the 40 either. I had to look that up too. I think that's less of a concern, right? Because I think you can just look at him and see that he's naturally fast and pretty easily, at least in my eyes, right neck and neck with Micah Parsons in terms of the most explosive guys in this class. I know Mike and I might disagree a little bit there. I think Parsons at his size is simply more impressive, whereas Owusu being 4 inches shorter and 20 pounds less, I kind of expect him to be a little bit quicker, hence the slightly higher grade. But before we get into the grade, I did want to talk about one thing that really kind of got on my nerves, and it was just kind of the way he was used at Notre Dame. Because this grade is more, it's based on those specific skills. Well, Notre Dame used him in this mold of, say, an Isaiah Simmons or, various guys that we've seen in the past in terms of, he played 40% of his snaps as a nickel corner. He played, 20% of his snaps as an edge rusher, et cetera, et cetera. Some as a free safety, some as a linebacker in the box. And I just don't think that's the best use for a guy like this, right? In that regard, if you're just moving him all around the field, he almost becomes, in my opinion, sort of a jack of all trades, but a master of none, right? To go with the cliche, right? Like, he's great in coverage for a linebacker. He's great in terms of bending off the edge and being quick for a linebacker. But would I rather have him on the field covering a slot receiver than my nickel corner? No. Would I rather have him in a deep zone than my free safety? No. Would I, what I mean? And I think that using him in that regard is almost slighting him and sort of minimizing the use you can get out of him. To me, the whole point of a guy that can do all these things and has these various talents, is you're going to put him in a similar spot every play, and the offense just has no idea what you're doing with him. Put him in, say, Levante David's role in Tampa Bay and watch him thrive. But no, why do I want him 27.5 yards away from the middle of the field playing on a slot wide receiver when he's just not up to that caliber of, say, a nickel cornerback, right? I saw him mock to the Patriots the other day, right? And now I'm really getting off track, but you just think of where they would use him, right? And if you're going to put him in those various positions, that means you have to take somebody off the field. So are you going to put him at nickel cornerback, and do you think he's better than J.C. Jackson? No. Are you going to put him at free safety, and is he a better free safety than Devin McCourty? No. Are you going to put him in the box and think he's a better downhill run defender than Kyle Van Noy? No. Are you going to put him off the edge and think that he's a better pass rusher than Matt Judon or Chase Winovich? No. So the whole thing of just moving his position because, oh, he could do it, let's do it, that doesn't work for me, right? To me, you have to use him in a role of almost deception, right? And that's, to me, how that sort of hybrid safety role was created with Jamal Adams. We're going to put him here, and you have no idea what's going to happen. Same with Derwin James. I think that Isaiah Simmons and some newer guys has sort of misconstrued that role, and now, oh, hey, yeah, I'm Isaiah Simmons. I'm going to go play outside corner because I can, never mind the fact that I'm not that good at it, right? So I think that's sort of my problem with how he's used. If he's used in the same way he was used at Notre Dame, throw this grade away because I'm not really convinced that he's going to be that great, right? I'm grading him based off how I project him as a linebacker, particularly as a will linebacker. And I think that in that regard, he projects really well, right? So Mike, do you agree with that sort of concern or no? I know you're shaking your head a little bit, bobbing it the other time. So yes or no, where are you on that whole thing?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. The way Notre Dame used a very suspect, especially in the next level, you're just not going to fly with that. On a lot of collegiate teams, that works and it works well. If you just have a good athlete, you can put them in different numerous areas and they can thrive. But in the next level, not going to be quite the case. So I totally agree with you there. I think I think moving them inside the box, around here and there, I think that, and I don't think that's what you're necessarily, talking down upon, but like using them in different, different gaps, different like linebacker positions and occasions. I don't think that's a problem. But yeah, a lot of times he was lined up, deep zone, or he was lined up as a nickel corner. And it's like, no, you have nickel corners and free safeties for that. So I totally agree with you there. Um, is definitely a concern. When I'm taking a look at Jeremiah, I'm looking at him as either, preferably a weak side linebacker or a middle linebacker in my grading.
No, I completely agree. And like you said, so many of those snaps, you just see him lined up so far away from the ball that it takes away from what he's doing, right? Because, we could say, oh, he's super aggressive in terms of coming up and taking on blockers despite his size, right? Well, that doesn't matter when the play can just go the other way and you're now 40 yards away, right? We could say he's great in coverage. Well, that doesn't matter when you can just throw to the other 3/4 of the field that he's not at because you're almost putting him out on an unnecessary island that's taking away so much of the upside to a guy like him. So with that being said, obviously apologies for the rant in that regard, but I do think he projects very well as a linebacker, right? I think that the range and pursuit is very good. You didn't get to see it as much when he's lined up way over by the sidelines, but hey, I think that move him in a little bit and you can see it at a much more frequent rate, right? You look at that last season and he only had 60 something total tackles compared to say Micah Parsons with over 100. I think that in large part is just due to their proximity to the ball, right? I'm not necessarily thinking that, Mike is some significantly better player in that regard. I think it's just because where they're lined up, and that's why the grades are 14.5 to 14. Coverage skills. I talked about with Micah, how he sort of struggles in terms of flipping his hips and running with guys and playing backwards. Owusu does very good for a linebacker in that regard, very comfortable, and you kind of expect it at his size. Only I've seen him anywhere weighed in from 216 to 221, right? So you kind of expect it at that minimized weight, but does a great job. Whether it's man zone, you can put him pretty much anywhere. Block shedding, I think that he, like I said, he takes on guys more aggressively and more physically than Micah did. The problem is, again, at his weight, even if he does try and stack and shed guys, it's not really going to work. He's more so just coming at him as like a heat-seeking missile and trying to just completely blow him up in that regard, which it worked a little bit at college, particularly against some receivers, but I'm not sure how really well that's going to work at the next level. Otherwise, quickness and change of direction, 10 out of 10. I don't think you can get much quicker than a guy like Koramoah. And other than that, I thought finishing and tackling was a little bit sloppy at times. As a linebacker, or even a safety, you know, accelerating to your top speed is incredibly important, but you also have to be able to de-accelerate and sort of break down and make plays in space, right? A lot of times you just see him flying in onto the screen, but then you also see him flying past the ball carrier or receiver in that regard. And I think part of that is his motor, right? He's always going 100%, and that's good. That's the 8.5 there, but I think he's got to learn to kind of tone it down a notch when it comes to, okay, time to break down and make the tackle. So Mike, 82.5 overall. What are your thoughts?
I agree with most things you said. I think often he goes for the kill shot when he needs to learn to play a little bit more conservative. You're not going to get those opportunities. Yes, he missed quite a bit of tackles trying to go for that, you know, that haymaker, and it just some of them didn't land. So others did highlight reel, but that's not what we're looking for at the next level. We're looking for consistency, and yeah, there are definitely concerns there. But and we already said in Micah's video that we project him best as a weak side linebacker. I'm looking at Jeremiah the same way. I think they both project the best at that. And I think if I'm taking a weak side linebacker, if that's kind of the position I'm looking for, I'm taking Jeremiah. I think kind of just that explosiveness, that ability to cover. I think range and pursuit, just all of it, and his ability to change direction. Often in Micah, I kind of saw him when he was changing direction. He kind of tripped over his own feet. Um, I did not see that to be the case with Jeremiah. I think he was very fluent in his motion. So, um, it, and just in raw grades, if I'm looking at that comparison, I have Jeremiah over him. But I think with a little bit more versatility, the size, I think it's more of a conversation to be had. I think Mike, obviously being 246, at least us knowing his strength, I think they both, obviously Micah has 25 pounds on him, but I think Jeremiah played stronger. But if I was going to be drafting an inside, middle linebacker, Mike linebacker, it'd be hard for me to draft Jeremiah over Micah. I just think with the size and probably his ability to play a little bit stronger eventually, just with his frame, I think Micah probably would be my move. But just what I saw film, Jeremiah just looked, yeah, Micah looked quick. Jeremiah looks quicker. Yeah. Explosiveness, same thing. Just a lot of range and pursuit, same thing. And like I've seen a lot of similarities in both players, but I just think Jeremiah just, at least off the film, just looked a little bit better. But also, we didn't see necessarily the same, opportunities. Micah and Jeremiah. I think Micah had that more traditional linebacker role, and I think it showed. I think he was be able to use his skill set at a more consistent rate. While Jeremiah, some films, it looked like he was at nickel 75% of it, and um, I would have much more liked to see him play in the box and see what he did there. But um, raw grade, I just think I like Jeremiah more. But I think you also have to know what you're getting from him, and if you don't use him in that way, um, Micah has more versatility.
No, I don't necessarily disagree. I think that, you know, the thing with Jeremiah compared to Micah is that there's certainly more questions surrounding Micah's game than Jeremiah's. And I shouldn't even just say his game, right? Him just as a whole. Obviously, we touched on the potential character stuff. We touched on the fact that he wasn't opt out. What direction has he went? We just saw Owusu. We saw him in January of 2021, right? Playing live action football, which, seems to be a rarity at this point with all these opt outs that we've had. So I do think that, you could look at him, you could sort of craft a role for him. Like I said, I would love to see him in that sort of Levante David-like coverage heavy will linebacker role in that regard. I think that Micah, I agree that he is more often a will, but I do think that he has some more versatility across the linebacking core, whereas just at that size, get him in a weight room, let him put on some strength. And now I think we're talking about a guy who could be a Sam, who, could maybe be a Mike. If you're running a 3-4, maybe he's not going to be the guy calling out the plays necessarily, but he's going to be the guy attacking downhill and making a lot of plays. So I think that there's more roles for Micah, but I think that in that one specific role, I do agree with you that, if I'm a 4-3 team and I'm looking for a guy who, is kind of that that do it all type player where he can drop in coverage, he can blitz a little bit, he can attack downhill and shoot gaps, I think I would potentially lean for Owusu. At that point, it just comes down to your scheme, right? And as you can see, the grades at the end of the day are very close, regardless, right? 86.68 to an 85.39. So far, that nets him as the number 4 overall player on my board. Obviously, with more positions left to come, I don't think he's going to stay that high. But regardless, I do think that he is most certainly in that middle of the sort of teens in the first round discussion. If not even maybe a little bit earlier, right? I've seen people, kind of like Mike, have him ahead of Parsons, and I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if he went higher, judging with those other concerns. But I think that either way, unless you're taking them top 5, by example, I think that you're going to get a pretty decent value with Owusu as long as you use them in the right role. Mike, your thoughts on that?
Totally agree. I think the grades, um, we're nickel and diamond here. When it's a point difference, I think it's just depending on the situation at hand. I think both Micah and Jeremiah probably, as I get outside the top 5, I think they start becoming in consideration. If I'm a team, needs that weak side linebacker, needs a Levante David or a throwback Lions player, DeAndre Levy kind of type player, then that's when those two start coming into consideration. And I think they're both right there. And then it's just both of them are so closely graded. Just what cup of tea are you looking for? So right there, I'm right there with you.
And it's kind of funny because a couple of videos ago now, I did Aaron Banks, right, the guard out of Notre Dame, obviously a teammate of Koramoah. And one thing with Banks is he is this super big and strong, just downhill sort of run blocker, right? But in terms of his mobility, he offers none. So when I'm trying to grade him on a universal scale, I had to give him a 4 out of 10 for mobility. Well, if you're a team who's just going to ask him to down block guys and drive block guys, and you have that role crafted perfectly for him, then yeah, his grade's going to be significantly higher, right? I think on a universal scale, when you have to consider everything that goes into just being a linebacker, I would slightly take Micah, but if you can craft that role sort of very specific to Owusu-Koramoah, I do think that I wouldn't necessarily be against taking him even higher than Micah in that regard, and potentially right around that sort of top 10, fringe top 10 discussion, right? I wouldn't necessarily hate that as of right now. Obviously, we'll have to see depending on the rest of the grades, but I think that he's an interesting guy, no question, and one that I'm super excited to see how he's used in the NFL, hopefully better than he was at Notre Dame. So, Mike, you got anything else or what?
I think that's about it. But if you're also a Jeremiah fan or a Fighting Irish fan or a Mic'd Up fan, you should probably leave a like, comment, subscribe. We enjoyed doing this. Um, Linebackers, some of my favorites. So Mike and Jeremiah have been hitting different. So hopefully you guys can tell um, that. And if not, let us know. So I think with that, I think we mic'd up and we mic it out.
Peace,
Deuces.
guys.